Welcome to the Buildology Podcast. I'm Perry. I'm Randy. I'm going to
help you become a buildologist.
Perry, Randy, Mac, and Justin have a combined 100 plus years of experience in the building and real estate industry. And now they bestow that experience to you to help you become buildologists. This is the Buildology Podcast. We've got building down to a science.
Project may come back on Friday.
That was the mole sauce.
Mole sauce is a new experience for me, as a matter of fact.
Good.
Hey guys, okay, all right, we're live.
Hey,
Here we go. Everything
They
from this
heard
point, they
mole sauce talk.
Wasting your time.
Yeah, mole.
Mole.
I'm not sure what show that is. Where it's mole.
I don't know.
I don't
We'll
know.
tackle that later time.
Okay, so I got some notes here, guys, on some show topics. This is episode number 3. So we've made it through 2 successful episodes, and here we are, arrived at number 3. So I thought it might be a little cleaner if I can see my notes here. The cat is back. Mm-hmm. So now if the cat bails out, I did determine last time it was because we didn't feed him.
Okay.
He bailed out. He's
Can
gone.
you blame him?
No,
I mean, come on.
no.
If you don't get
We
fed,
did keep him here a little late that night.
A little late.
Yeah.
So he gets mad if you don't pet him.
Not
you know,
good.
I don't know. Coughed up a furball, I think. So this week, I think the topics we were going to cover was pricing your home in a hot market, how to do that. And Perry, I think you got some really good information on that. Mac, we were going to talk about relationship selling.
That's right.
And then we're going to talk about some material used in cold weather situations that we just came out of and what we might want to look at as building, investing properties, flip properties. You know, there was a lot of people in a lot of different situations that we need to look at stuff, how we do it in the future.
Correct. Yeah, that was a lot of lessons learned.
And kind of tying into that, but a separate topic on its own, would be maybe solar versus natural gas as far as an energy independent situation. There's a couple options out there. I don't think people really evaluate solar from the standpoint as a backup generator. There's a really strong market for backup generators, and it makes a lot of sense. But we talked about last week how expensive they are, and we'll kind of toss around some ideas there. So if you want to get us started, Perry, this week, let's talk about pricing your home in a hot market.
Right. And what most people don't realize is that when the market is good, bad mistakes are made because they get excited that their home sells in a short period of time. They say, my realtor did such a good job. We put the home on the market and it sold in a few hours or it sold in a few days. And that's not necessarily a good job because nothing against the realtors at all. They're working they're working their tails off, and we appreciate that. But at the same time, if you're not providing enough information to your customer and getting them the top dollar, then maybe you're leaving some on the table, and you don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's a very, very important point because we talked about before that a homeowner is an investor.
100%.
They just, it's home for a while, and then you decide to sell, and then it becomes an investment.
And one thing that came to mind as I was driving here today is when you're selling your home, you're excited about the home you're going to buy, the next home you're going to buy. You're not excited about the home you're going to leave. But the person buying your home is excited about that home. To them, that is their new home purchase, the home that you're leaving. So recognize that and don't think about what am I getting away from, but what am I doing to attract the next person to that product? And they are excited about it, and in a market like it we have today, they're willing to pay top dollar for that. And so you have to also look at something else. When you get insurance, everyone's insurance, I'm sure everyone at this table, your insurance has increased this year. And why is that? It's because they're insuring the replacement cost.
Yes.
So if you were to take a home that was built in the 90s and that home burned down and you had to rebuild it today, it would be significantly higher. Just because your home was built in the 90s doesn't mean it has to be priced in the 90s.
Yeah.
Your insurance went up, your taxes are going to go up, so your sales price can go up.
Right.
You know, I was looking at, we talked about CMAs last week. Some people think that's a community market analysis. Some people say it's competitive market analysis. I think it really is both, quite frankly.
I think it is.
I think it's whatever Perry calls it, honestly.
Well,
I mean,
I
at
really
this
thought he
point,
was going to make a choice on that, but he just took him
No,
out
I
of
think
it.
so.
I would say this. I would even challenge people if they disagree down in the comment section. Let you guys pick.
Let me know.
We'll take a vote.
We'll take a vote. So
Because in
Someone's
reality-
going to say it's the Country Music Awards.
yeah, because
That's a good point. Good
so
point.
by episode 4, I think we need to commit to a cat name, community versus competitive market analysis.
Absolutely. Or a CCMA, because it truly is a competitive community market analysis.
And those are all different than CYAs.
Yeah, he just added another layer of controversy.
There you go. That's
go.
what we do here. Controversy.
So
That's right.
you have an example there. Why don't you share with us kind of something that you found?
Some of the things, example, here are 2 houses on the same street. Okay, this is down in the south side of Houston,
Okay.
and they're on the same street. And they were both built about the same time, both built in the late 1960s, early 1970s. The key here is that one sold in February of last year. That's before COVID. The other one sold in June of last year, in the middle of COVID. They're almost the exact same price. I mean, the exact same size. The difference in price is over $50,000 in sales price. So you've got the same house on the same street, the same size, same exact number of bedrooms, bathrooms. The lot size is virtually the same, and yet one sells for $50,000 more than the other one.
What would you attribute that to?
Supply and demand is one thing. Now, keep this in mind too. That also tells you that the home that you live in now is more valuable today because of COVID, because now everyone is looking at where are they today.
Right.
And they're deciding, okay, I need to move either to the bigger home or something that I'm missing. An office that used to be a clutter. It used to be a place, a catch-all, as we call it, where you put all those things you don't use every day. Now it's an office. Now it's a classroom for your children. Now it's a place for your dog to play, whatever it might be. Now it has become where your mother-in-law has moved back in with you because she's not comfortable being home by herself.
Yeah.
Whatever it might be, it's now a usable space.
That's a really interesting point that I haven't even thought about, Perry, is that, we always get to analyze things after they happen, but kind of right now we're on the tail end of this thing happening. And when we come out of it, what you just brought up, I think, is a really valid point. And a lot of people will probably be doing is evaluating their home situation and coming up to sell it because maybe it didn't meet what their needs are, or they had needs and it all got put on hold for a year.
That's right. Well, and also the fact that if you have a significant other that has been encouraging you to move, and then you were stuck with that significant other in the house for a year, and you heard that again and again and again, maybe you're starting to listen now. And maybe you also understand why that became such a heightened awareness, because you do need to move. You do need to have that extra bedroom, or you need to have a place to put the laundry, or whatever it might be.
And I can speak to half of the population, and it takes a few times for us to hear that, but eventually we get the hint.
Losing my headphones, yes, 100%. Yeah, we don't listen as well.
Right.
But the other thing too, I was looking at, I noticed on this, the house that sold for $50,000 less, how long would you think it took it to sell? Pre-COVID.
I don't know.
Pre-COVID?
I would think probably fairly quickly.
Actually,
Right.
surprisingly enough, it's not. 65 days.
Okay,
wow.
that's an eternity in today's market.
That's right. And the one that sold for $50,000 more during the height of COVID sold in 8 days.
Okay.
And so that's why when I look at these and I talk about in the detail that we'll cover in the future, we'll go over it in more detail. But the bottom line is every home today is an asset. There are fewer lots available. The replacement cost, I keep losing my headphones. Somehow I'm losing my headphones. I guess it's all that hair I have on my head.
It's
not doing a good
listen,
job.
I
keeping it on.
don't have that problem.
Probably still think you have coconut oil from your trip to Mexico.
I may. It's all those. You know what I learned is called products.
Products.
Oh, products.
It's the product that you put in your hair. And we were out on the beach and it was windy. And my son said, I don't have enough product in my hair. I said, what are you talking about? He said, that's why my hair keeps blowing in the wind, is I don't have enough product in it.
That's wonderful.
That's wonderful.
Don't
Listen,
care to
I
use
wish I
product.
had hair to put products in.
Exactly.
something that
have
most of
product
us
at
at the
my
table
hair, I
don't have
know.
to worry about is
That's
product.
right.
Hey, go ahead, Perry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, so, okay, I think we all here understand the CMA, however way you want to call it, or the comments that win. But someone out there selling their home, how do they know whether they're getting a proper estimate from the realtor? Is there questions they can ask? How do they fetter that out?
What I would suggest is when they talk to the realtor, they don't ask what's the average home selling for, because when you look at this, it depends upon what timeline they used. You can get an average that can be off by $10 to $15 per square foot based upon when you look at it. I said earlier, there's a $50,000 difference in the same house from February to June. So look at it over an annual period. Instead of just looking at the last 3 months, looking at the last 12 months, and then throw out the high and throw out the low. But even more importantly, ask the realtor to give you a copy of this, and then it's in your neighborhood. Go drive the community. Look at the neighbors' houses.
That's a great point, because sometimes, realtors, it really is like a neighborhood by neighborhood expertise. A lot of times it's one realtor in one neighborhood just dominates, and another neighborhood he's not as strong. But the smartest person in the neighborhood selling the house is usually the person that owns the house, if they just know what to look for.
100%. And if they will just drive the community and don't look at it with a bias. In other words, don't say, well, that I don't like that brick, or I don't like that color of the shingles, whatever it might be. Look at it from how big is the yard, for example. And it's on here. It tells you the square footage of the yard. So look at that. Is it a corner lot? Is it a cul-de-sac lot? Look at the number of trees on the lot. Does it have a tree in the front yard? Is it well landscaped? Is it well maintained? Look at is it brick? Is it siding? Is it stucco? Ask yourself those questions, and then you have to be careful about asking this next one: is would I buy it? Because just because you won't buy it doesn't mean somebody else will.
Right.
Or somebody else won't. I guess
All it takes is one buyer, one customer that falls in love with that home. So
that's all it takes.
You know.
And as I said in the beginning, remember, the home you're leaving is the home of someone else's dreams.
Yeah.
So look at it from that perspective. Now, one last thing too about thinking about your home specifically is they always ask me, should I paint it? Should I replace the roof? My answer would be, if it's a glaring defect, then fix it. But if it's not, then don't fix it. But go ahead and address it. If the house has scuff marks because you've moved furniture or because you have a dog or whatever, and you touch it up a little bit, have an allowance built in and say, at this price, if you'd like to repaint the master bedroom or the family room, I'll be happy to include that in the sales price that we have here. Or because most people go out and they replace the roof and they get no value for it.
Yeah, they have to justify the dollars. There are a lot of people that say, roof is a fantastic example because it's a very costly item.
$10,000.
$10,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, a homeowner, what I've seen is they judge it off the visual aspect of the roof, not the actual life expectancy of the roof. And they don't understand that you can power wash a roof and bring the visual aspect of it back into it. You got to understand, like, how long was this roof designed to last for? And if it holds water out, it's performing. It's performing, right?
And
those black marks on there can be power washed out.
Right.
And a lot of people say, "Oh, I need a new roof because it looks bad." Well, you have a giant oak tree that for 20 years has.
and think about if it doesn't leak. If it's the old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Right.
So you put a new roof on, it could leak.
Right.
And great points, guys. But I get asked this question all the time by my customers that want to know. They said, "Hey, we know there's some defects with our current home. We know that we're going to have to get them repaired. So we're going to go ahead and do it." And I cautioned them. I said, think about that, because what happens is when they sell that home, the new customer, the new buyer, is going to order an inspection, most likely. And that inspector is going to go through the house and point out anything that they can find. So, you may be fixing stuff that the inspector really doesn't care about. And missing some of the most important things that you could be spending that money on.
That's a super valuable point, Mac, because if you just preemptively throw $10,000 out, you're going to be less likely in that negotiating situation to want to deal with a real issue in the house because you just put $10,000 into the house.
Not only that, but if the inspector does come up with a legitimate correction that needs to be made, and it's going to cost you $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, you've already spent that money on something else that maybe wasn't as important.
Right. Now you're thinking about not taking the deal, and that's a whole nother a whole nother show topic, basically.
And it is, but also from a pricing perspective, if you look at what the homes are selling for in the market, in today's market, so if the average home is selling for $325,000 and your realtor says you need to be in the sweet spot, so price it at $322 or $325, whatever the number is, being in the average, you're not today in an average market. But if you price it at $340, so you add $15,000 to it, you may get an offer at $330, but you can use that offer and say, I'll be happy to sell it to you at $330, but you're going to replace this on your own. You're going to replace the roof, or I'm not going to paint it for you, or I'm not going to pay the closing costs.
It's a negotiable point.
Every bit of it's negotiable. And just because a realtor or anyone else says this is customary doesn't mean it's required.
Right.
So just because it may be customary that you pay 2% towards closing cost, or you pay the owner's title policy, doesn't mean you have to.
Doesn't mean it's written in stone.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
That's why there's a blank. If you look at it, there's a blank on the agreement that you fill in for that amount.
I think a lot of times the emotion gets involved with selling your house, whereas investors don't run into that situation because it's purely a financial decision. And anytime you get the emotional side, you're selling your house, there's doubt that creeps in your mind because you've lived there so long. Oh, I didn't repaint, and oh, I didn't do this, and oh, I didn't do that. That next buyer is evaluating that house amongst, like you said, others in the market at the same time with a bland lens.
Mm-hmm.
There is no emotion at that point. It is not their home. It's what they want to make their home.
So much easier to come in and do a business analysis on a piece of property.
Yes.
Again, when you remove that emotion. Good point.
You know, another reference that I've used before, because I've had investors that come in and made an offer on a house, and the buyer or the seller was insulted. I said, don't be insulted. You've been invited to the prom. That's in essence what it is. It's a dance.
Yeah, it's a
You've
dance.
been invited to the dance. So they've already accepted the fact that your home is worthy of their money.
Yes.
Now it's just a matter of what is the price.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you've been invited to the dance, then go to the dance.
Absolutely.
Don't be insulted.
And that is, I mean, all of these points can be complete. We could talk for hours and hours about any of these individual points.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, a point that we've made, like the CMA is a fantastic starting point, and maybe in some future episodes we kind of break off into separating the emotion from the financial side of it, because investors coming out there buying a property, and if it's from an owner, there is some emotional attachment, but that really is just a financial decision. And the people coming in, if you're switching neighborhoods for a school or a job or something like that, there's those things that become involved in that decision. But when an investor comes in to look at it, it's purely money.
100%.
And that's it.
And that's something that in a future episode, or maybe in our master class, we should go through a CMA, regardless of what it is called, in great detail. Because if you're getting contacted by investors, just as Randy mentioned last week, he gets mail all the time about I'd like to buy your home. If you're getting contacts from investors, you're underpriced. And what I'd like to do is just in the future, we'll come back and look at this in a master class in more detail, talk about days on the market, talk about square footage of lot, not just the house, talk about dollars per square foot, and talk about timing.
And maybe even breaking it up per client group that would be looking at it, because if you're owner, which an owner of a property selling should access this information, should understand this information, but realtors too. I mean, you have a wide spectrum of realtors, from brand new people to experts out there. And just because someone's an expert, this is a broad industry, and you can be a fantastic realtor, really good at one thing, and still have a weakness.
Certainly.
It doesn't mean you're not an expert. You can still be great at something and just be not as strong as in an area right there. So I think the trying to find and seek out knowledge is the most important thing.
And that's all we're trying to do, to help people be more knowledgeable of what the opportunities are. And we'll cover that in the future.
Okay, great. So let's talk about, Mac, relationship selling. And what I thought would be, when you brought that topic up to me, I thought it was a fantastic topic, because it reaches out to so many people. Because realtors need to hear this information, new home sales counselors need to hear this information, even people selling their homes need to understand that this is a relationship business. There is a ton of technology, the internet is great, people use the internet to find that property and deal with it, but at the end of the day, it is a relationship between people that handles this transaction. I think we get a little numb to it out there in the world, whereas we see automation. And I mean, I go to the bank now, and there's a lot less people in the bank these days than there used to be. There's a lot of like interior ATMs, and as this world transitions to this, I don't think you'll ever replace that automation in selling your home.
This is a topic that I am very, very passionate about. And I've always called it relationship selling back in the day when I began in the late 70s. There was such a thing that was often taught. You were trained to follow a critical path, and it was actually called that. And there were certain things that you had to do in a certain sequence, and if you skipped any step, then the whole thing was over with. I mean, you were a terrible salesperson. And I just never, ever could get comfortable with that aspect. It was more like institutional selling, where you just had this script and, and it just left out. The thing that really bothered me the most was it left out the human aspect. And over the years, I cheated. I'll be honest. I mean, back then, we were shopped. I mean, we were a video shop, mystery shop. We'd have to get up at quarterly meetings and perform and role play on the stage, and it was horrible, because I felt like I was living a lie. I mean, I've always had this feeling that the most important aspect of the entire sales process, and in my case, selling new homes, was the fact that all I was trying to do was educate. And I still, to this day, when I talk to customers, I tell them, look, I'm not going to try to sell you anything. What I am going to do is I'm going to educate you. I'm going to give you as much information as I can possibly give you so that you can make good decisions. Ask any customer of mine today, they tell you that's just my standard spiel. And when you do that, I mean, it really disarms people. And I don't do that as a means of trickery or anything,
right.
But it's sincerity. It's really saying, look, I'm here to help you. Even at the end of the day, when you're finished after a 2 or 3 hour presentation, and you've, kind of like Bob Seger says in the song, you leave everything on the stage, right?
Right.
Randy's the singer; he gets it. So, same thing when you're working with customers, don't leave anything. I mean, leave everything on the stage. I mean, give them everything you've got, but ask good questions. I mean, this topic, I can talk for days and weeks and months about this.
So, I understand, like, going through the sales trainings that I've been through and the mechanical aspects of it. And I think a lot of times it comes from what they're trying to do is, in this industry, it's called building science for a reason, is because it's repeatable. But the human aspect of this is not. And when you try to blend something that is, we deal with a lot of measurements, engineering, design, building. I mean, this is an industry of formulas, right? And you can do formulas and do formulas, but when it comes to selling something, and everyone sells something in their life, and I really, really think that people, when they hear the word sales, almost get turned off in some form of fashion, but they don't realize that you sell an idea to your wife. Where do you want to go for dinner? I mean, if you really want to go to a restaurant for dinner, you're convincing someone to do something that you want to do. You've sold something.
It's called persuasion.
It's called persuasion, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Put it in a higher level. If you walk into a room and it smells bad, are you going to breathe or are you going to walk out?
Right.
So realistically, the air that you breathe, you have to be sold on
Perry,
the fact that
we're all thinking right now why that room smells bad, but we're not going there.
Smelling bad is probably an objective view.
Man, and I thought this podcast was going so well.
It was going so well, and I'm glad he said room instead of elevator. So.
Yeah.
But it goes back to what Max said. It's a people business. In the very first show we ever did, someone even commented, and they said, I'm glad you brought up it's still a people business. It is. It's people to people. And if that person that you're talking to knows that you care about them, the relationship that you talked about, and you ask the right questions and you listen to what they have to say.
And it goes back to the first podcast. We touched on it. And it's so important too, because if you can't really help someone unless you kind of understand what they're looking for. So that's my goal, is to ask the proper questions, and then listen. It's
Yeah.
very simple.
Yeah, if you're a realtor out there and you've got a buyer and they come to you and you just give them the 3 or 5 properties that you want to show them, and you're wondering why that third one that they have lost complete trust in you, it's because you didn't do your job. You didn't find out who they were. You didn't answer the question. You didn't do your right. Yes, you're selling them a home, but there's no negative connotation with selling them a home.
Yeah.
Selling them a home means identifying that person and their needs
Right.
and satisfying their needs.
Right. And again, it's so important too, because there's a term in the industry. It's I don't care for it a whole lot, but it's called curb qualifying. When you see someone come up, you have a tendency to say, "Hey, I've already kind of made an idea. I've got an idea about what home I'm going to show them." Anyone out there listening, watching this, please, if you're getting into sales or if you've been in sales for years, and that is a mindset, please get rid of that. If there's one takeaway that I would like to ask everybody to forget that whole thing.
Some of the training that I've done in the past, people say, well, tell me what questions I should ask. And the most simple question is very simple. It's very easy. Tell me why you're here today. What is your goal? As simple as that.
They
Why
want
are
to
you
smell
here?
what's in that room, Terry.
Back to basic.
Here's something that I love, but because I run into this a lot of times too, and I think you'll appreciate this, is, a long time ago, you would have the ABCs of selling, right? Always be closing.
Yeah.
And those guys come across so bad because all they're focused about is the dollar that they're going to make. All that training was just predominant in the marketplace, and it went through sales trainers, companies, and it's the always be closing, always be closing. And if you're in that mindset, the last mindset you are is in that customer's best interest. And that right there is the number one deal killer.
I've got a question. So a realtor listening to this, or new home sales, or almost anybody selling anything in the business of transferring product from one person to another for a financial gain or that a relationship, where is there a place to go to if they wanted to learn more about that? Where would you go to seek that knowledge out on this topic?
I think our podcast would be a good way to start.
So what would be the second choice?
The second choice. There are some great seminars. There are some great educators out there. I say educator because of trainers, because I think you train animals, you train your pets, but you educate humans. And it's an education process. So there's some great educators out there that can talk about whatever market, whatever you're selling, whether it's real estate, whether it's new home sales or whatever. But there's some great resources out there for that.
Yeah, you could be selling a Snickers bar and sells. If you don't understand the person that buying that, if you're talking to a diabetic and you don't know it, they don't want a candy bar at that point in time. But it's because you don't know your client.
True.
And it really, what you're talking about, Mac, is there, like I was saying, is there's a lot of sales guides out there that really what they're doing is they're trying to get the person buying it, right, to buy in. They're not really giving, they're selling them something, and they're selling them something that they want to hear is them making money.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mac, you brought up on the very first time we got together, and you said everyone wakes up listening to the same radio station. What's in it for me?
Right.
If you go into it with that approach, not what's in it for you, but what's in it for your customer.
Right.
And that's why you ask them, what brought you in today? Why are you here today?
Right.
How can I help you today?
Right.
What's your goal? What did you want to accomplish when you decided you were driving to see me today?
Yeah. And some of the things I've found, Perry, Justin, Randy, that over the years when I look at the problems, I learn more from the problems I've encountered in this business than the successes. And one of the things I've learned from all the witnessing not only my own failures as I was learning and trying to figure everything out, but looking at all the salespeople that I've managed and worked with over the years, is too many of them just like you said, they're focused on themselves rather than on the customer. And as long as you keep asking the right questions, putting that customer always at the forefront of everything that you do, it's all going to be good.
And you're really just solving a problem.
That's
all, a salesperson is really just solving a problem because there's a reason, there's a motivation behind that person wanting to move,
Yeah.
whether it's moving to a new home or moving away from an old home, or they have to move to a new area. There's a motivation. And that's why you just ask them.
And I really would look forward to maybe talking a lot more in the future, in future podcasts about this particular topic, because it is something I'm really passionate about. And there's so many different avenues that you can go down, and it all comes back to the basics, back to relationship selling.
You know, a couple of things we could do, and then we can move on, but is we could create a list of questions that could be in the master class that talks about why you would ask a certain question
Right.
and what you're looking to gain, what knowledge you're looking to gain from that, and give some people some bullets that you can learn from. But then also, if someone in the audience has something they're struggling with, regardless of what it is, no matter
Right.
what the product is
Right.
you're selling, ask us. Ask us, how do you overcome this? Whether it's power lines, whether it's a railroad track,
Right.
whether it's we talked about odors earlier, whether it's living next to sewer plant. I've sold homes next to sewer treatment plants before.
And railroad tracks, and
Exactly.
you name it. Yeah.
Ask us, and we'll tell you how you get around.
Right.
Max,
Give them
Max, something that you said that ties back into last week's show with the relationship selling is, and into the CMA, is the hot market. And Perry, last week you brought up how a hot market hides a lot of poor techniques, sales strategies, things like that, because someone just wants to buy because there is pent-up demand. You know, there's a lot of factors that create a hot market, but that hides a lot of errors, right? So, Mac, what I would say is one of the key takeaways that I've learned, and I would like to do a future, training or master class on, is people don't prepare in a good time for the bad time. This market is an up and down market, and I see too many people not take advantage of the good time, building that relationship with those people, because in a good market you want to sell, but in a bad market people want to sell. But if you have relationships built, you have clients built, and you can get through bad times with strong sales techniques in good times.
I can tell you a quick story exactly along those lines. When the Woodlands first opened, I mean, it was the #1 rated master plan community in the United States. And I worked for a national builder at that time. And as it would be expected, our #1 salesperson in the city of Houston came from the Woodlands. And so we were in a training class, just as you talked about, Mac, back in the 80s. And they said, 80s or 90s, and they said, you were the #1 recognized salesperson in our company last year. Can we just role play with you and ask you a few questions, and you can share your knowledge with the rest of the group? And of course, they said, I'd be happy to do so. And this trainer started asking them questions. And they started talking about something that had nothing to do with what this trainer was asking about. And he asked again, and he asked again. And the salesperson became so frustrated that they said, why are you asking me these questions? And he said, because I'm the customer, and this is what's important to me. But that #1 salesperson had been created in a good market.
In a good market.
And they lost their skills, unfortunately.
Yeah, Randy, you brought up something I thought was pretty important too, that maybe we make a master class in regards to relationship selling, and then break inside of that the clients and the customer side. There's multiple sides of what that is, from a real estate experience, a new home sales. You really have existing homes and new homes, and both of them can, a realtor can handle both of them. A new home salesperson can handle that situation, and the market is going to dictate, but there's still a customer, and that person in the middle there. I got my real estate license when I was 19 years old, right? This is like a personal thing that I skipped. My wife and I skipped every Friday in high school, and we went to real estate class. That was before you could do it online. And so we went Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to real estate school, and we got married coming out of school. And a week later, we took our real estate exam, and we went and sold real estate for my parents. And, first deals I was doing was lots, and, family home was building. And then we started finding out, like, okay, well, they need to sell their home to get into a new home. And, being young, I reached out to all those sales guides out there, and all the bad information that I got there. And I was young, but I understood, like, this doesn't seem right. This seems like I'm the focus when I read the sales guide. Nothing is telling me what about the person here? Yes, they're telling you to ask questions why and, such things like that, but they're not telling you the relationship side of it. So I think as realtors go out there and take real estate exams, you've got your license, I got my license. There's all these classes on how to fill out a contract, how to do all this stuff, but there isn't a class on relationship selling. So I think that would be an excellent master class to put aside and say, listen, if you have anything to do with sales, real estate, it doesn't matter what. You could be selling suits, you could be selling cars, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the product is not what matters. It's your relationship with the buyer that matters.
It's true.
And so I think we should really, when we do a master class on that MAC, and focus that and get people to understand there are people trying to sell you guides and books if you're in sales. And that's their goal, is to sell you a guide and a book. And the way they do that is painting this picture of you being a millionaire in sales. You can become a millionaire in sales, but it's a lot quicker if you satisfy the needs of the client.
We said that before. You achieve your goal by helping other people achieve theirs.
Right.
And as long as they fit hand in glove,
Right.
you'll be successful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very good, guys. So last week we kind of touched base on the freeze that we had and some of the problems and stuff like that. So let's talk this week, Randy, maybe some of the materials and things that we should maybe be looking at a little bit deeper as we move forward with new knowledge. I think anytime we have a big event like this, you gain knowledge. Failure is knowledge, and it doesn't matter what your failure in. It could be a product failure, it could be a process failure, it could be any type of failure, but that is knowledge. And that's kind of the goal of this, is recognizing what knowledge is and disseminating it against listeners, people that tune in and figure out, you know what, I want to get better at what I do. And then here they are, they're trying to come and reach out and get some more knowledge. So let's look back at what just happened and see, is there any knowledge that we can gain out of that?
Yeah, so just like you mentioned, last week's show, we were all coming off the snow apocalypse 2021 that we went through, at least the way.
We haven't named that. Look, another name. Let's listen. Okay, we've got CMAs, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. What should we call that week?
Listen, what is that week? There is, even the news hasn't called that thing. So I like I vote Randy's Snowpocalypse. The Texas Snowpocalypse right there. Yeah. Okay, we got to name Snowpocalypse. We got to name this cat, and we got to name what a CMA, determine what a CMA is. So consensus names.
So, I mean, out of any kind of happening like that, you always learn lessons. You go through some turmoil and some pain and a little bit of and a lot of aggravation. In this case, it's world famous about the power problems we had here in Texas. That's a much bigger problem than we can solve sitting around this table. But it got cold, and it got really cold. And the homes that are built here aren't really designed for that kind of weather, because it just doesn't get that cold here. So once the power came back on and homes started to heat up, then obviously the next problem to experience was busted pipes. And that's the biggest aggravation, is when you finally get power back on, and then if you turned your water off, if you didn't or whatever, and then you start to listen. Remember, we all talk about,
yes,
I'm listening, I'm going to turn the water, I'm going to listen. And more cases than not, and we all have personal experiences with people we know or us or whatever, pipes busted, water streaming in, and then the mess really starts. Yeah. Minus all of the ceiling cave-ins and any cutting holes to try to find it, and chasing problems, fixing one and then chasing another. Every plumber in town, suddenly their phones blew up, and they're 30 homes deep in within the first 30 minutes of their day, repairing and helping people get back on track. So what I was thinking about is we could get into causes of why pipes froze and different ways to do that. But I kind of want to talk about the pipe itself.
Okay.
And so because it goes through, the materials that we use in new construction has gone through a transformation over time.
Yeah.
And so and I'm going to use my home as an example. My home was built in the late 80s.
Okay.
Back in that day, everyone used the common pipe to use galvanized metal piping.
Okay.
That's just what you use for water supply. It's a terrible material to use over a long period of time. So you're working with a galvanized piece of steel, basically. All of the joints are threaded. Your T's are threaded, your caps are threaded, your 90s are threaded. So threading in and of itself is a failure waiting to happen, because over time, the threading is thin, water gets to it, it corrodes. Something happens like this, it finally breaks the thin and water comes out. The metal itself is not flexible, really. So if there's water in the pipe, it gets cold enough. We all know water swells when it freezes. The pipe can only hold so much. It pops loose. 9 times out of 10 in those cases, they pop at the joints because that's the weakest part of that system. So galvanized metal piping, not good for use. And we could run about the way it's ran and locations and that, but that's just the material itself. So over time, we graduate to the next material, which is copper piping. Okay, so we're moving from galvanized to copper. We still have joints that need to be put together, but we're not threading them anymore. We're now soldering them together. It's a stronger joint. Copper in and of itself conducts heat and cold very well. So it will shed off heat rapidly. It will shed off cold. So in colder weather, it's more forgiving than galvanized because it can tolerate that kind of temperatures better than a galvanized.
The change in temperature.
Exactly, change in temperature. But copper is also a metal. It's a weak metal, to be honest with you. And over time, when water runs through that copper piping, it is shedding off a little bit of copper, minute particles at a time. And over time, that walls get thin. And the pipe that is being made itself is not consistent in its wall thickness anyway. There will be pockets of thinness in it. It's just the nature of the metal. And so you get the combination of water rushing past a weak spot, a thin spot in the metal, making it thinner. Here comes the cold. That water freezes. The first place it goes is that thin wall. So that's where you've seen pictures that copper has that big split.
Right.
Now, these aren't breaking at the joints. Galvanized is breaking at the joints. Copper is actually popping in the middle of the pipe because it's thin and it finds those thin spots. Copper is still used today in certain instances, but that's what replaced the galvanized. So now we move on to the next material, PVC piping, CPVC. It's used today. Okay, so now we're going from a metal pipe to basically a plastic pipe. CPVC is flexible. It's more flexible than galvanized. It's more flexible than copper, but still has its limits. Once again, no longer screwing the joints together, no more threading them. These are glued, primered and glued. It weighs less, so it's not putting strain on where it's placed. So you can ship it easier, carry more in trucks. It's easier to use. It's easy to manufacture.
Faster joint.
Its installation is quicker.
Yeah.
So it's more forgiving. But at the same time, it's not all forgiving.
Right.
Water freezes, gets cold enough. CPVC is back to breaking at the joints because that's the weakest part. The pipe itself is strong. The joints are not strong because it's two pieces coming together. So today, if people are building new homes or walk around new construction, the common pipe you're going to see these days is called PEX piping. And PEX is you'll see it in a red line. That's the hot side. The blue color is the cold side. PEX itself stands for cross-linked polyethylene. So now we're dealing with a polyethylene product that is quite flexible, designed to be that way. It can expand and contract on its own without losing integrity. But the cross-link comes like inside that pipe. There's a woven fabric type material, and it comes together like a weave. So it goes through that pipe. So as it does expand and contract, that cross-link helps keep it together.
It actually has a memory in it, too.
It does, too. It will expand out to its form, and it automatically goes back to the original shape and diameter it was before. In the new construction world, as a manager of construction supervisors, we would cut pieces of PEX, cap it on the end, fill it with water and cap it on the ends, and throw it in the freezer in the sales offices. So that way, if we're doing training ourselves or clients come in and the sales professionals, they need to talk about it, they can actually grab that water-filled pipe out of the freezer, and you can see how it swelled, and they'll actually let it thaw while they're doing their working with their clients. And at the end, when it's thawed, you can see it goes back to its shape. It hadn't busted anywhere. The water's not leaking, so it's a good product. The best thing about PEX piping, so galvanized threaded joints, copper soldered joints, CPVC glued joints, PEX no joints, a few. A PEX pipe can make a 90-degree turn. You can turn it 90 degrees. So as it goes up a wall, is the old products you'd have to solder solder or glue or whatever.
Right.
That PEX can make a 90-degree turn. They put it in a little channel that helps it keep that shape, and it goes down. So using PEX piping, there's less connections in the run. And anytime you have less connections, there's fewer chances that's going to leak. It's not foolproof, but it will tolerate the kind of temperatures we had, and it'll hold it better. Now, what you'll also might see if you're walking new construction is another system that goes along with PEX, and that's called the ManaBlock system. So if everyone has a breaker panel in their house for their electricity, you know, if you're going to go change a plug, change a fixture, you go to the breaker panel, you find the room, flick it off, and you're ready to break into that. So ManaBlock makes a system that does just that same service, but for the water delivery.
So you can isolate it.
You can isolate it. So you'll have this big block, a water line's coming out of it. So if something did happen, a freeze comes, you know, my bathroom's leaking or my shower head goes, you can run to the ManaBlock, find that specific water line, shut that one specifically off, and not lose water to the rest of the house.
The benefit, not losing water.
So,
else.
you know, one of the things on the sales side, that's like a fantastic explanation. And from my history of seeing it on the sales side, and I think you would agree, Mac, is people come in and they instantly think, oh, these builders are trying to save money and not use copper because it's expensive, and think that that's the reason that we're not using the product in the industry anymore. It isn't, because they understand that there's new technology, and a home built in the 70s is not a home built in 2020, 2021, that there is technology that every single year there's new products. Just as electronics change, home building changes. It's a competitive market at every phase, and all these companies are competing for better business, and they have to build better products to sell products, and they've got to sell it to builders.
Amen.
That's the only place that it makes sense to sell it. Yes, you can develop a product for a remodel, but that every remodel is different. You're not going down to the foundation at that point. But products are delivered to the market in new construction, and new construction is what moves the industry, whether it being remodel or new, because if you're remodeling something, you're bringing today's products into something old right there. And that was a fantastic explanation of that. And Mac, I think you could agree that people coming in, if they saw that and they don't understand it, and it goes back to the selling, of explaining and educating people on what they're looking at. And if you're a realtor or a salesperson, you have to understand that it's not a cost thing. It's no builder, no remodeler, no one in the world wants to come back to a pipe that broke.
No, in fact, I mean, if you look at the cost analysis between using the PEX product and other alternatives, the PEX is actually a more expensive product, but it's
the labor is what's cheaper because it's more efficient. He doesn't have to do as many joints. So if you lined up, hey, I'm going to stack the copper over here and the PEX over here, well, all the fittings and all this stuff that you have to buy on this over here, you would think, wow, that's a lot more. But this product is actually more. The time savings, because you have so few fittings and so few connections that they can get in and out so much quicker, that's the expensive side of any equation, is the labor side of it. And so if you can reduce the labor side, that's where it makes sense.
That's where it makes absolute sense. But the thing is, from the customer side, if the salesperson doesn't take the time and doesn't have the knowledge to educate that customer, the amount of money, whatever that difference is, yes, it's less expensive on the labor side, but the product itself is more expensive. But that is a feature, and it has tremendous benefits. But if the salesperson doesn't have product knowledge and does not communicate that to the customer, all that's for naught.
And I would
was wasted.
I would bet that most salespeople are wondering, where can I get that product knowledge? Now, obviously, not everyone has a Randy on site to be able to
we're
learn
lucky.
from.
We're lucky.
We're very fortunate. But at the same time, whoever you're buying that product from, they have product knowledge within that facility. So whoever your plumbers are buying their PEX pipe from,
great resource.
Use them as a resource. You take the initiative as a salesperson to educate yourself so that you can then educate the customer.
Right. And guys, can I ask one question here, because this question, since the snowpocalypse. I've talked to hundreds
2021.
Hundreds of customers in the past week, and everyone's asking the same question. Mac, what could we have done to prevent the pipes from bursting? Can you guys share? I know what my thoughts are, but somebody share with me about what you feel is the most effective way to freeze-proof something.
I'll add something to Randy's great explanation where he explained the PEX pipe system right there, and then when it comes out to a hose bib, people don't interact with PEX right there. They interact with copper. They transition to get that threaded faucet on there, and they don't understand that is the weakest point of that system because you switched back over to an older system, and you need to cover and deal with that. And personally, I didn't catch one myself. I mean, I admit my mistakes. Like if someone points one out to me, I mean, I'll own up to it. And I'm not afraid to admit, as long as I've been in this industry, I didn't catch the one copper pipe coming out of my house because it was coming from an LP tank that I buried. And in the back of my mind, that LP tank was buried. And I didn't catch that little 18-inch copper that was coming up there because I have PEX in my house. I did everything. But even I'm vulnerable to seeing that stuff and learning something that I didn't anticipate. Now, that was a really weird one. I'll give you that. I'm not sure how many people would have caught that one just because what it didn't allow the gas to basically expand at the same rate, and then the water heater couldn't pick it up at the right rate, and it shut down. Just some weird things happened.
But you could have insulated it.
But I could have insulated it. I could have wrapped it. I could have addressed it. And even in a PEX system doesn't mean you're immune to anything. Right. You just you've knocked 95% of the potential problems out. Yeah. You still have to be, cognizant of where does that switch. Well, maybe at the water heater it switches. Anywhere where it switches into a fixture or something that it's transitioning to, because the system is great. The system's not going to fail. It's the thing that's riding on the system that might fail.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, not everyone has PEX.
Right.
They live in different age homes when it wasn't even around.
Right.
But to answer your question, I mean, it kind of goes back to the old school ways of doing this, and that's like, we put all of our piping above ground because of what Perry mentioned last time is there's piping and slabs. We can't handle that around here. That's just getting up there, and any water pipe you see that does not have something on top of it in your attic, put something on top of it. It's not a common practice to run them below the insulation layer because, once again, historically we don't plan for that type of weather that we had. So that's the number one deal in the home. Wrap it, do the same thing your grandmother did. Open up the attic stair at night and let the heat kind of, just 2 or 3 degrees difference could make all of the difference in your attic, and let a little bit of heat flow in the cold spaces.
33 and 32 is 1 degree.
And then to Justin's, it's anything.
Hey, we didn't even need Perry for that, man.
Right.
Come on, that was
easy.
Listen, that was easy. Listen, all of our listeners can tune into that one right there. That was solid.
Remember the Zilculator?
The Zilculator, yes.
There's Max.
It's fun to say.
Now let me ask you this question, because I've been asked the same question. Said, well, okay, on the hose bibs outside, do you turn it on and let it drip? Do you turn your inside faucets on? How do you respond to that?
You can.
Okay.
A hose bib, any hose bib these days that are put on, they're considered frost proof to begin with. So they're built in a way that when you turn that hose bib off, it doesn't hold water inside the actual metal. The water is designed to come out, and if there's no water in it, there's nothing to expand. Yeah. So that helps. So turning your hose bib on really doesn't help much, because actually what you're doing is you're putting water in something that automatically sheds water when you turn it off.
Okay.
So that's that. Inside, moving water freezes. It takes longer to freeze moving water. So my particular home, our kitchen sink's on an outside wall. It's on the north side of the house. That's the one I ran because it's the furthest one from my water supply, and I made sure I had the longest run of water moving through. I didn't get it all because some of my pipes did freeze. Like I said, fortunately, they did not bust, but they did freeze, and I lost water until it thawed out.
Yeah, and with a cold 20-knot north wind.
Exactly.
Vulnerable.
But I'm even a culprit too, because I don't even think I mentioned this last week, was I did, sprinkler system. I know it's not the most important. I turned mine off. I drained my backflow preventer, but I didn't drain it good enough because it split the copper. I got a hairline crack in the side of that housing now, and those things are about $450. So I'll be replacing that when it gets warm enough to turn the sprinkler on.
There's a lot more of those busted out there than
no one
know.
knows about.
Springtime comes and
watch
it turns
that.
the water
Oh, yeah.
on. There's going to be some fountains
right.
showing.
None of us will have water pressure.
No.
That's how
That's
we'll know.
right. As soon as they turn it on, there it goes.
We
It's
turn on the
popping off.
shower and it's
done.
just drip, drip, drip.
And
I just happened to notice it when I was walking by. And I'm like, oh man, there's water coming out of that. So, okay,
And,
I gotta
you
fix
just
that.
brought up a key point, though, Mac. You said water pressure.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in old school. I left my water dripping and so forth. But if the water pressure gets low in your community, even though you have your water on
Yeah.
to your kitchen sink and your faucet,
Yeah,
it eventually may run slow enough that it'll freeze.
it will freeze. Yep.
It will freeze. It can
Not
still.
only that, but from a more practical and safety oriented standpoint, is that when everybody's got their pipes dripping, and there is maybe a fire in the neighborhood, the fire department comes in, they've got no pressure.
Yeah.
True.
So I mean, and to kind of close out this topic, I chose the piping because I wanted to talk about materials, and that's since there's been a lot of attention on pipes around
Right.
here. Obviously,
Right.
there are other ways in the building industry that we can do to help, and I'd love to if anyone has any questions in the comments. So we can get into more details on some of the other practices and materials that we use to help that situation in a future show, or
Yeah.
maybe a more specific topic and tailor it down. But the piping, since that's kind of the thing, and you couldn't find them in any of the large box stores for repairs. So future stuff, we can really get into more nuts and bolts of how we can prevent that even further.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing kind of on my list that I wanted to discuss, so we talked about losing water. The other side of the equation is losing power, and everyone who was out there susceptible to the grid in Texas. We have our own grid, and good, bad, and different. That's not for us to decide here, but we are the consumers of the electricity, and when it goes away, a lot of our ability goes away with it. And what are some alternatives? We kind of mentioned last week as individuals, what could we do to supplement that power? And we brought up the whole home generator, generators themselves. There's a pretty big danger in any fire department would just cringe at someone bringing a generator in their house. And so the whole home generator makes a lot of sense to go put in just from the safety factor of it. And then I wanted to bring up something that I never really hear any information on the news or anything about, but as we move to a solar market or an alternative energy market, like it's coming, there's nothing that we can do about it. Just like we can't control the power grid, what that power consists of, we can't control either, but what we can control is what we can buy. We can buy natural gas and we can buy solar panels. And there's never a conversation about the difference between the two of them in a situation where you don't have power. So you can spend, let's say on the low end, Mac, if you got a really inexpensive system, I think you're in the $10,000 range on a whole home generator on the absolute bare minimum. But I think you're $30,000 for you got 4,000 square feet and you want this thing to light up. It's going to cost you a pretty penny to crank this thing on and power everything that you have going on in the house. So if you were to compare solar panel now of where we come, not the solar panels people know from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, but we're talking about solar in 2021. The solar market has just drastically been driven down. Tesla right now is the cheapest provider in the United States of solar power. There's other providers. There's subcontractors. There's all kinds of things. But if you were to look at just for anyone to go on and just go to Tesla.com and go on to the energy side and start looking at what a solar system would cost, let's say you're $22,000, okay, for solar panels on a house versus a $12,000 natural gas. Let's say you're $10,000 difference in what's going to happen there. But now I've got a system that pays me every single day versus one that I might use 3 or 4 times a year. And what you can do with the solar panel is going to allow you to do other things in your house as your automotive market moves to electric, what you can do to equip your house. So if you're a builder, a remodeler, or something, or a purchaser of this natural gas, there is this alternative out there that if you had a solar panel, now in a snowstorm, would you gain as much solar as, snowstorm? No. But if you had a battery backup in there, you would be able to run those critical systems. You could go in there and tell it, hey, I want my refrigerator to come on. I need my heat to come on. You need these things to come on, just like you do in a natural gas situation. You would go in there, depending on your budget, and say what you want to come on, because it's all load that we're talking about. It's like, do I want my AC to come on? Well, if you want your AC to come on, you're going to spend some money, okay? Yeah. Same thing on solar. If that's super critical to you, you want your AC to come on, that's it's half your energy consumption right there, and you want that thing to come on. Right. It's going to cost money to get that thing to come on. And if that's in your budget, that's great. But if it's not in your budget and you're talking about other things in your house, then the price is going to come down. So it's really a balance out there. So yes, you're going to spend more for it. But I would be really interested to see what a house sells for that has a whole home generator on it, and one that basically, okay, if I'm selling my house, Perry, and I put $25,000 into it for a solar system, and I put $15,000 into it for a whole home generator, as the homeowner, I'm like, I put some stuff in here. What's the new buyer gonna give me that return dollar on? No one's gonna give you 100%.
And
right?
Just as Mac mentioned before, though, you have to educate them on how much they will save. And the only way you'll be able to do that is have a history of electrical bills, right, and have a factual history of what it's going to cost with the solar, and show how much every month from the solar is being contributed towards the downside of that cost from electrical. And so you show a diminishing return. And you show at what point is there break even.
So right, let's use this as an example that you buy a system big enough to eliminate your electric bill. And when I say eliminate, there will be times when the grid feeds you some power, but then there's times when you feed it back. But on average, let's say if you had a $250 a month electric bill and you put a system on your house that would eliminate that altogether. But let's say you financed it and it cost you $200, so you're only saving $50 a month, right? But let's say you go to sell that house now, right? And your capital expense is in the house, okay? And you raise your price $10,000, $12,000 because you put $25,000 in it for the okay. So you're going to recoup some of that money back when you sell it. Not all of it, but some portion of it you're going to sell back. But the future owner of that house has no electric bill.
Right. No monthly reoccurring obligation.
Versus a gas engine sitting outside that I have to maintain, or I have to deal with, or I have to do, where did you get that thing? I got to change the oil in it. It's like a pool. I got to get someone to make sure that this thing, when I need it, comes on, and I'm the second owner. I'm the third owner. That's where people don't think about that. And that solar system, the second and third owner, they just don't have an electric bill. Well, that's pretty strong.
In that scenario, and let me be clear if I understand this, in that scenario, how do they not have an electric bill?
So you're generating enough electricity from the solar panels, okay? So what happens is you can generate enough for $25,000 system, that you're generating enough electricity that you're pushing power back, and you have a battery pack in your house that is handling overnight and all the times when the sun's not shining, and you're still connected to the grid. And sometimes when in the summertime, you're pushing a lot of power back. You're spinning that meter back. So you have to have net metering. There's a lot of things that kind of go into it, just like the natural gas generator. You got to get the gas on the right side of the house. You got to get electric over there. Both systems are going to involve experts to install. But let's say you get past the experts installing it and just compare system to system. EV panels on a house, we are at a point right now where you can put EV panels on a house and not have an electric bill. And in a future market, if I was selling my house and I was competing against other houses and I only had a $10,000 premium on that system, I was willing to, put $15,000 into this because I was getting paid every month for that. You're getting some of your money back in your house. They get to choose this one or this one, and this one doesn't have $250 a month in electric. That's a pretty good sales point.
That's $3,000 a year divided into $10,000 additional cost. If you live there for more than 3 years, you've now paid nothing for that system.
Is that the only? Are there solar systems available that don't involve EVs or selling back, or is there anything out there that
you can just?
I'm just curious. Is it supplemental power versus?
So there's two ways.
So I'm very unfamiliar with that.
Okay, so you put solar panels on your house, and one method, the least expensive method, would be to put solar panels on your house and get net metering from your utility provider, which essentially means you get to push the meter backwards.
Right.
Okay, so you're pushing the meter backwards in sun, and then at night you're using some electric, and then you're going to design your system to where you're capturing enough to net average that out to zero. The alternative way is it's going to cost a little bit more, is to put like a power wall or basically a battery in your house, okay, and you generate enough electricity that you power up that battery, and then overnight you're using battery power, okay, and you're not necessarily trying to push the meter back. And then there's some alternative ways to go about, hybrid ways of going about that, but you're either going to store it or try to push it back, but the end goal is to reduce your electric bill to zero.
I got you.
And so you always attack the solar side. How do I get to zero? What does it cost me to get to zero? And maybe you don't get to zero. Maybe you get to $50 or $75 because your budget won't let you get there. But the thing is, there's some value in selling that. And my question would be, what is the value of a house with a whole home generator that you spent? Because what we're talking about is, one, I have no electric bill. But in this time of need, we've achieved the same thing. So
I think it's a peace of mind. The generator itself is a peace of mind idea.
Yeah.
Because you sleep at night knowing you've got a generator. If the power goes out, you're protected. But as you're describing in the solar panels, you've got it every day. You live it every day.
Right.
So
maybe what we'll do, maybe in a future show, we'll get some kind of we'll get some like breakdowns, like you did, Perry, on that CMA. Mm-hmm. Let me run some breakdowns, and let's get some real information, because this is information I don't think is really out there.
It's not. I personally would like to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to educate. No, everyone evaluates them independently for two different situations, but they really could be evaluated on the same situation. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to value in a home, that's pretty good information to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I personally would like to know a lot more about that, so that's definitely a good future topic.
And us here in Texas, this is kind of a fact that sometimes gets lost too, is what's driving the cost down is one of the major players in solar in the country is Tesla. Well, they're putting the largest manufacturing plant in Texas right now. And right now it's just going to be cranking out vehicles, but you don't build the largest facility in the world. They also build solar panels and energy and stuff like that. In our own backyard, we're going to be generating more solar panels than anywhere in the world in our own backyard. So in a place that we might need that situation, it's probably going to be a little cheaper for us to get that sometime in the future. And so it's something to evaluate.
And even when it was cold, even that week that it was extremely cold, it was still sunny.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, the sunnier it is, the colder it got at night because there's no clouds.
Right.
So
was it as sunny here as it was in Cancun?
It was sunnier in Mexico.
It was sunnier.
That was a very good show, guys.
You are closer to the sun there.
That's right.
Well, guys, hey, that was a fantastic episode 3. So I think there was a lot of valuable information. I think we got a lot of places to build upon, go a little deeper in, and like to thank you and thank everyone else out there for tuning in.
Yeah.
Thank
you all very much.
Thank you guys.
We'll see you next week.
Have a good one.
All right. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Buildology Podcast. We have home building down to a science. Perry, Randy, Mac, and Justin have over 100 years experience in the building and real estate industry. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show, and we hope you had fun along the way. We know we did. Make sure to pass on our YouTube channel to others. The Buildologist. Take care, and we'll see you again soon.